Welcome to our Best of Redditorups, where the OP's mother apparently thought conditional love meant drugging her daughter until she became a statistic. Our next Reddit post comes from Throra_Glassbird. The op was 28 years old, engaged to a guy named Ryan, and said her mother, Marianne, was the kind of woman who baked pies for Sunday church, hugged widows at funerals, and left everyone with the impression that she was an angel in a cardigan. There was just one tiny detail inside the house. That angel was the devil in low heels, according to her. Her entire childhood was a parade of strange illnesses, fainting, nausea, sudden spells of low blood pressure, hormonal migraines, food sensitivities, anxiety, nervous exhaustion. Marianne always had an elegant name for everything, which was perfect because that way nobody ever had to investigate too deeply. And always, her mother appeared as the saint who slept in hospital chairs, made soup, cried in doctors' offices, and said she just wanted to see her daughter get better. The OP's father died when she was 12 in a car accident that, at the time, was treated as a tragic misfortune. Her older brother, Nolan, left home at 18 and spent years saying their mother was wrong in the head. Nobody took him very seriously because Nolan drank, fought, and had the terrible luck of telling the truth without gift wrapping it first. 4 years before the post, Nolan died from what was called an accidental overdose. Marianne, of course, became grieving mother of the year. They practically could have handed her a trophy. The op said she spent her teenage years being told she was fragile, difficult, unstable, too sensitive, too dramatic, too ungrateful. Basically, if she sneezed, Marianne turned it into a miniseries. If she disagreed, it was a breakdown. If she cried, it was proof of emotional instability. So, at 18, she left for college in another state. And something very curious happened. The illnesses vanished, just like magic, as if her body had finally realized that breathing far away from her mother was the real treatment. She kept minimal contact for years. Christmas here, an uncomfortable lunch there, the occasional guilt-soaked phone call full of Catholic mother lines like, I just want my little girl back. The problem started when she got engaged, because Marianne could not handle the idea of losing control over her daughter right when there was finally a big enough audience for a proper performance. At first, her mother came bearing the full fake reconciliation starter pack. She sent flowers, wrote giant emotional texts saying she had matured, talked about the wedding as if it were a new chance for the family. The op said she did not trust her, but she was tired of looking like the bitter daughter, while her mother played the tragic widow princess version of herself for relatives who never saw anything. So she gave in, just a little, enough to crack the door open. And that was when hell walked in wearing perfume and sensible shoes. The first incident happened during a reconnection lunch at an aunt's house. Marianne insisted on making her daughter a special tea because she looked tired. 15 minutes later, the op was slurring her words, dizzy, feeling as if she had gotten drunk without drinking anything. She passed out in the bathroom and woke up in there. The doctor said maybe it was exhaustion, dehydration, wedding stress. Marianne cried in the hallway, held her daughter's hand, and told every relative there that Claire's always been like this, so delicate. How convenient. The victim nearly blacks out, and the villain still gets herself a dramatic solo. The op tried to rationalize it, thought maybe it really had been stress, work, wedding planning, adult life. All those excuses people invent because the truth is too ugly to look at head on the first time. But then, 3 weeks later, she caught a mild cold. Nothing major. Ryan went to work, and Marianne showed up with homemade soup because mother knows best. The op took to spoonfuls, texted her fiancé that she felt strange, and later woke up on the bathroom floor with a cut on her forehead and vomit on her shirt. Ryan found her hours later unconscious with the shower still running. At the hospital, the op was told again that it could have been low blood pressure. Marianne, naturally, appeared wearing the full Madonna of suffering face, spoke to nurses like she was one of them, and casually mentioned that her daughter sometimes has episodes like this since childhood. When the op said she had no history of anything like that outside her mother's environment, Marianne smiled and said, sweetheart, you forget so much when you're upset. And then came the detail that turned discomfort into outright terror. 2 days later, while Ryan was washing the soup pot Marianne had left behind, he commented that there was a weird bitter residue stuck to the bottom like crushed medication. The op froze. And then, like happens in stories like this, her brain started stitching together all the things it had been pretending not to see. The childhood illnesses, the disappearance of symptoms when she moved away, Nolan calling their mother sick, Marianne always offering drinks, tea, soup, smoothies, herbal remedies, calming tinctures, any liquid at all that could enter her daughter's body wrapped in applause and good intentions. In the comments, Reddit did something rare. It stopped yelling divorce for 5 seconds and focused on what actually mattered. One person wrote, do not throw that pot away. Do not throw that soup away. Do not throw anything away. And for the love of God, a toxicology screening, another said. Your mother is not treating you like a daughter. She is treating you like a project. And a third was even more direct. If your symptoms only happen after your mother feeds you, that is not intuition. That is a pattern. The op replied that she felt ridiculous even typing it because saying, I think my mother is poisoning me made her feel like a deranged character in a bad movie. But in her words, I would rather embarrass myself in a lab than end up as a headline in an obituary. Okay, sensible. Finally, then the op posted an update. Ryan had saved the rest of the soup in the freezer, purely on the paranoid instinct of a man who had already realized his future mother-in-law was not a sweet church lady, but some kind of lipstick-wearing social experiment. At the same time, the op requested her hospital records. A more careful doctor reviewed the blood work from the second collapse and found traces of sedatives and blood pressure medication that she did not take and never taken. They were not massive amounts, but they were enough to drop someone. Cause confusion, fainting, falls, drowning in the shower, aspirating vomit. All those charming little things death enjoys. The soup was tested. It contained substances consistent with what had shown up in her blood, and that was that. The maybe phase was over. We had officially entered. My mother tried to remove me from the earth with soup. The op said that when she finally confronted reality, she vomited again, this time without any chemical seasoning. Ryan wanted to go straight to the police, but the lawyer advised them to build everything carefully, because Marianne was seen by half the family as a poor helpful widow, and by some healthcare professionals as that devoted mother. In other words, she had a polished social resume of sainthood, and the op had the classic profile of the perfect victim to be displeased, anxious daughter. History of episodes: wedding approaching, emotionally distressed. Marianne had written the entire script long before her daughter realized she was even in a play. In the comments, someone asked if there had been anything else strange about her mother's behavior. The op said yes. After the second hospital visit, Marianne started sending weirdly threatening messages disguised as concern. One of them said, "You need to accept that you are not well. Ryan is not going to handle this forever." Another said, "If you keep pretending everything is normal, something really bad is going to happen." And the most disturbing one said, "You were always safest when you let me take care of you." Nothing says maternal love quite like emotional blackmail with a therapeutic gloss. Someone else asked about Nolan, the dead brother. The op replied that he had tried to warn her years earlier. Not clearly, because Nolan was the kind of guy who turned trauma into dirty jokes and cheap alcohol. But he said things like, "Don't eat anything she gives you. If she starts with tea, dump it." At the time, the op thought he was just being dramatic. The rebellious son doing what rebellious sons do. Now, she was sitting there staring at the screen like someone realizing she ignored a fire alarm. Because the sound was inconvenient, the police agreed to take the report, but they made it clear that it would be hard to move forward on the evidence they had at that point. They needed context, messages, a history, ideally something showing direct intent. Because apparently a mother drugging her daughter twice is still not enough, unless she includes a notarized letter saying, "Yes, that was me, Ryan," and the op changed the locks, installed the camera at the front door, another in the kitchen, another in the living room, and basically turned their apartment into Big Brother, Domestic Crime Edition. Marianne noticed she was losing access and got worse. She called from unknown numbers, showed up uninvited, sobbed to aunts and cousins that her daughter was having a mental collapse because of wedding pressure. And here comes a little psychopath masterstroke. Before she had even been accused of anything, Marianne was already laying the groundwork to make herself look credible and her daughter look unstable. That is not improvisation. That is strategy. 2 weeks later, the op posted again. Marianne sent a long message begging for one last talk from mother to daughter, saying she could not bear being treated like a criminal. She wanted to bring her daughter's favorite dessert and talk peacefully. The op said the idea of eating anything made by that woman now had roughly the same appeal as licking a battery. But the detective on the case suggested that if she agreed to meet her mother in a controlled environment with cameras and officers nearby, they might get exactly what they still needed. So they staged a dinner trap. Already delightful. Nothing says healing family conversation like tactical police support. The op and Ryan pretended to be calmer. They said they would allow Marianne to come over to talk. She arrived with a smile that looked rehearsed in the mirror, a lemon pie, and a bottle of white wine. She hugged her daughter for longer than normal, in that possessive way that looks like affection until you realize it is really territorial marking. Ryan stayed polite, almost friendly. The op said she nearly gagged just looking at the dessert. They sat down, chatted about nothing. Marianne cried twice in under 10 minutes, which for her probably counted as a warm-up. She said she was devastated to be seen as a monster. Said all she had ever done was care. Said Nolan had destroyed his own life. Said Claire had always had a tendency to dramatize. Full bingo card, no surprises. At one point, the op stood up and said she was going to the bathroom. Ryan followed a few seconds later as if he had gotten a phone call. And Marianne was left alone in the kitchen for less than a minute. Less than a minute was enough. The camera caught everything. She looked around, opened her purse, took out a small amber bottle, unscrewed it, poured liquid into her daughter's wine glass, stirred it with her finger like a woman mixing sugar into coffee, and slipped the bottle back into her bag. No hesitation, no tremor, no guilt, just efficiency. That is not the gesture of someone acting in a desperate panic. That is the gesture of someone with practice. When the op and Ryan came back, the police entered. According to the Post, Marianne froze for about 2 seconds. That tiny silence where the psychopath brain tries to locate the most usable lie. Then the theater began. First she said it was a natural calming extract because her daughter had been so nervous. Then she said her daughter had asked for something to help her sleep. Then she started crying, collapsed into a chair, and asked how her own daughter could do this to her own mother. Classic. It is always impressive how people like this can turn, being caught red-handed into victimhood with the speed of a magician yanking a scarf from a sleeve. The bottle was seized. It contained concentrated sedatives and another substance that, when combined with alcohol, could cause severe respiratory depression. Or, in plain English, it could kill. Not make her dizzy, not help her sleep, kill. The pie had also been tampered with, but only the slice that had already been set aside for the op. Marianne was arrested that night. In the comments, half the people were horrified, the other half were making that digital face that says, "I knew it." One user wrote, "Your mother was not coming over to talk. She was coming over to finish the job." Another said, "She poisoned you on camera because she was sure she could still walk away looking like the victim." That is industrial-grade narcissism. The op replied that the worst part was not seeing her mother pour the liquid into the glass. The worst part was how calm Marianne looked while doing it. She did not look furious, desperate, or out of control. She looked like someone setting a pretty table, good lord, even on the page. That sends a chill up the spine, but then the story, already horrible, decided to dig a basement under the basement. Another update came after police got a search warrant for Marianne's house. They found an entire folder of the OP's medical records going back to childhood. Many of them copied for no clear reason, all organized by date, symptom, and medication. There were handwritten notes about how her daughter reacted to specific drugs. Things like, 5 drops makes her sluggish, food hides it well, tea works faster. This was not an anxious mother. This was a lab researcher using her own daughter as a test subject. They also found internet searches like mixing sedatives with wine, how long until unconscious, death by aspiration during sleep, and just to keep the mood as light as a piano falling from a 5th-floor window. A document titled "If I Need to Speak at the Funeral." Not a joke. The woman had already drafted a funeral speech for her own daughter. Imagine being so addicted to attention that you write the eulogy before serving dessert. That is not motherhood. That is social vampirism with a day planner. And still, it was not over. Among old papers and boxes in the basement, the police found material related to Nolan's death. Test results, clippings, prescriptions, even printed messages. His case was reopened. A toxicologist reviewed the records and concluded that his overdose may not have been so accidental after all. Too many inconsistencies, too many substances, and a pattern that now looked glaringly obvious. Nolan had also died at home, after a period of reconciliation with his mother. The op received a box of old belongings from an aunt that had once belonged to her brother. Inside was a crumpled note, undated, probably never sent. It read, "If she starts acting sweet, run. If she cooks for you, throw it out." I should have run sooner. That kind of sentence arrives late and still lands like a brick. The op said she read it and sat on the kitchen floor for almost an hour, because suddenly the entire story of her life rearranged itself on its own. The illnesses, the episodes, the brother labeled the troubled one, the father dead in a poorly explained accident, the mother always perfect in public and indispensable exactly when someone got sick. It was not chaos. It was method. Later, investigators uncovered something else grotesque. Weeks before her arrest, Marianne had told a church friend that she was afraid of losing Claire to that man, and that some people only value their mother when life knocks them down. The friend thought it sounded sad, normal, because, of course, when that kind of sentence comes out of a well-dressed woman speaking in the tone of a martyr, people hear poetry. If it came out of a thriller villain, it would sound like a confession. The op posted a final update months later. Marianne was formally charged with attempted murder with aggravating factors and criminal food tampering. The case involving Nolan was still under investigation. As for the OP's father, detectives could not conclude anything definitive, but they reopened documents from the old accident because there were mechanical details that had never been fully examined. In other words, the hole might have gone even deeper. Maybe that family had been living with a predator wearing a maternal face for decades, and only now the varnish had started to crack. Ryan and the op canceled the big wedding. No church, no dessert table, no one's crying for reasons they did not understand. Months later, they got married in a small ceremony with 2 witnesses and security at the door. The op said that for the first time in her life, she ate, drank, and made it through a celebration without being afraid she might black out. She also started therapy focused on complex trauma and wrote what was by far the most devastating line in the entire post. "I spent years trying to understand why I felt guilty for surviving a living mother. Now I understand. I was raised to feel responsible for the happiness of someone who only felt happy when I was weak." That is one of those lines that makes you want to put the phone down and stare at the ceiling. In the final comments, someone asked whether she missed the mother she thought she had. She answered, "I miss the mother I invented so I could survive the woman I actually had." Brutal. Precise. No foam, honestly. This case is a perfect lesson in how real monsters almost never look like monsters. Sometimes they come with pie recipes, soft voices, church cards, and an Olympic-level ability to play the victim. Marianne was not a protective mother. She was a woman starving for control, pity, and sentimentality. A healthy daughter was useless to her. A sick daughter was a stage, and the cruelest part of all is that Nolan tried to warn her. Her body tried to warn her. Distance tried to warn her. The pattern tried to warn her, but years of manipulation train a victim to distrust herself. That is what people like this do. They do not just hurt you. They teach you to apologize for bleeding. If that woman is not a psychopath in a floral apron, then I do not know what is.